Tuesday. So the next two will be on Thursday, and after that back to Tuesday. Now, going to go to some questions that were sent in. There were a lot. I don't think we're going to even get to them all. But we might. We'll never know unless I get started, will we? Somebody said, gift giving challenges with family again, which I assume implies that we have had gift giving challenges with family at least once before. I know what you've shared in the past, yet it always feels so difficult when it comes down to it. And of course, it's only difficult because you are afraid. Because you're afraid of what people think of you. My mother has yelled at me for not giving my 21-year-old brother, my non-gift giving brother, ironically, a separate gift in addition to the one that my child gave him. So, my child has given my brother a gift, and now my mother is bugging me that I don't give him a gift too. He has now said that he only wants restaurant gift cards. So not only is she bugging me to give him a gift, but she's bugging me to give him the right kind of gift. I mean, holy smokes. How I mean, this is gifts on demand. So Christmas is coming around, and people are now not only demanding gifts, but the right kind of gifts. Give me this on Christmas. Unbelievable. It's so hard to break this family pattern without tremendous negative consequences with my mother and sibling. Well, honey, this is really all your fault. Really. This is really not your mother's fault. This is really not your sibling's fault. You're not going to change them. This is really very much like going outside when it's raining and then crying because you get wet. You know what they're like. So the only person's behavior that's going to change here is yours. You're either going to take an umbrella outside or you're not. You're the only person who's going to change here. So you got to decide whether you're going to make your world revolve around earning your mother's approval or not. Your mother has already made it amply clear that you have to buy her approval. And so far, what you're saying is, okay, really, you're meekly and, excuse me, foolishly saying, okay, I'll agree to buy your approval, hanging your head like a sheepdog. You really are. You need to grow a spine and say, I'm not going to buy my mother's approval anymore. And think about the economy of this. If you buy her approval, it's worthless anyway. Anytime you buy somebody's affection, it's worthless. You need to decide the only kind of love that's worth anything is real love, which is unconditional. So I'm not going to buy her approval anymore. It's worthless. So I'm simply going to do the right thing. I'm going to do what I choose to do. And if my mother chooses to get mad, well, that's her choice. Then she can get mad. But you're not in charge of her reaction. And if she bugs you about it, you might try explaining it to her, say, once. You might say, you know, Mom, they called it a Christmas gift because it's not a Christmas tax. You might try explaining that. It's not a tax. It's not compulsory. It's not forced. It's a gift. It's something you choose to give. And so this year, I chose not to give my brother a gift. Instead, my son chose to give the gift for the family, or whatever. You can choose to give whatever explanation you want. But you're done. And then if your mother decides to fuss and fume and kick and pout like a child, which is really what it is, that's up to her. Because what she's telling you is that she does not love you unconditionally. And if you do anything to change her reaction, Well, she's not going to be loving you unconditionally anyway, is she? So why bother? You get this? The only fool in this play is really you, because you understand it. She doesn't. She doesn't understand what real love even is. You do. So you're the only person here who can knowingly make a choice. I'm not going to participate in this foolishness. Don't. There's nothing mean about it. You're just deciding I'm going to choose real love. There. And you're going to unconditionally offer to your brother your time, your attention, your acceptance, your forgiveness, your patience, your whatever. And you don't have to choose to give this year's Christmas tax. You really don't. It's really a fool's game, and nobody wins. They don't. I'm going to sort of pop back and forth here between sent questions and questions from the room. My husband and I, from the Mesa group, share few common interests. I believe in marriage, which is good since you're married, but struggle feeling close to him as we share so little in common and spend limited time together. It seems I go elsewhere to get my cup filled more often than not. How do you create a desire to change things for the better? My husband is content with the way our marriage is and sees no reason to change it. Yet, I want it to improve. How? Oh, at this point, the things you share in common don't matter spit. None. It doesn't matter how many things you share in common. Interests, things you do, that matters zero. And at this point, it doesn't matter whether he has an interest to change things. At this point, there's only really one thing that matters. Do you have an interest in becoming more unconditionally loving? That's all that's required to change a relationship, is one person having an interest in becoming more loving. That'll be enough. So if you have an interest in becoming more loving toward him, if you learn more about unconditional love, if you read more about it, if you start demonstrating more unconditional love toward him, you really think he's not going to notice that? It doesn't matter one whit whether you both like to canoe together or hike, or if you both like to collect stamps, or if you both share interest in a particular hobby. If you start to demonstrate forgiveness and patience and kindness and an interest in any of the things that he does, he will notice. Your relationship will start to change. It will. So I recommend that you read either the Real Love book, or you read especially the Real Love and Marriage book. If you read that book, there's a huge section in the book of 20 or 30 pages just of loving acts that you can demonstrate or share with your husband, whether he's interested in real love or not, that will surely get his interest and change the nature of your relationship, whether you share common interests or not. So I recommend that you do those things, period. Do those on your own, and you're going to start to see a change in your relationship. Now, in addition, I'd recommend that you participate in the loving groups that exist in the Arizona area. If you're logged in with the Mesa Loving Group, there are people right there in the room who can tell you how to find those groups. You participate in the conference calls. There's so many ways that you can find unconditional love in your own life so that you can then share it with your husband. If you'll do this on your own, you'll bring into your relationship the one ingredient that is guaranteed to change your marriage. So don't worry about the things you have in common. You'll find those things down the road. It's love that makes the difference, not the things. magical saying, I can testify that what Greg is saying is true because over 2 years ago I had this same situation with my wife. It really is a fact. It's love that matters. It's not all the little stuff. Let's see. Let me go from the questions that were sent. Here's a woman who says, my husband has read the Real Love and Marriage book with me, but he really doesn't make the effort to be truthful about himself. He's only truthful about my mistakes. How generous of him. In fact, he's really good at playing the victim role. I've made the primary decision and want to become as loving to him as I can. I also am trying to let go of my expectations. I'm going to a loving group and making phone calls trying to get filled up before I go home from work. He gets home before I do, and almost every night he's not happy about something. It's a never-ending list, and it keeps changing. I've been trying hard not to react to his demands and to tell the truth about myself to him, but this seems to make him even madder, and he starts bringing up all my past mistakes. Some of them are just outright lies. How can I keep my bucket from being kicked over and walking onto the field of death? It sounds like you're expecting him to be a wise man to you. It says here that you are telling the truth about yourself to him, but that seems to make him madder, and then he brings up more of your past mistakes. So unless he brings up the truth about you to you, I would suggest that you not use him as a sounding board for telling the truth about yourself too. The idea of telling the truth about yourself to somebody is to create opportunities to feel accepted and loved. And so for some time, until he becomes more loving, you need to tell the truth about yourself to people who are capable of loving you, like people in loving groups, like people on conference calls, like loving coaches, and so on, to people who are already loving. You need to wait for a while. It's pretty obvious that at this point he is not capable of being unconditionally loving. So there's no sense going to that particular well for real love. He can't do it. So at this point he only plays on the field of death. So don't step onto the field of death with him. Now, if he comes at you out of the blue and attacks you and comes at you with this never-ending list of you should have this and you should have that and I don't like this about you, then you just say, you know, yes, I agree. I could be better at this. You're right about that. Yes, you're right. Just don't defend yourself. And if you simply refuse to defend yourself, he'll run out of steam. Eventually, he'll run out of his list. He'll eventually quit talking. But you don't need to offer new things to tell the truth about yourself. You don't need to give him new ammunition to shoot you with. So you can tell the truth about yourself to other people so that they can love you. With him, simply refuse to defend yourself. Just don't step onto the field of death with him. But don't initiate conversations where you begin telling him the truth about yourself. It's just silly. He just can't participate in those kinds of conversations with you. From Mesa, can you address the fact that victims have a distorted view of reality? You think? Victims see everything in terms of themselves. Victims see everything in terms of, look what you should have done for me. Look what you did to me. It's not my fault. They can twist every statement that anybody ever makes into a statement about them. No kidding. Everything. They read a newspaper article about the children in Liberia, and I've watched them do this. And they will turn it into a discussion about how somehow somebody didn't pay attention to them. Everything. is about them. It's how victims survive. Somebody's telling a moving, touching story about them, and they'll say, yes, I had something like that happen to, guess who? Me. And poof, the argument or the discussion is now suddenly, surprisingly, centered on them. Victims can't live without the subject of the discussion being about them. And I don't mean just about them, but about how something was improperly done to them and about how something should have been done for them. These aren't just dispassionate intellectual discussions. They're emotional discussions about how they were done wrong. So, yeah, their perception of reality is distorted. They can't see anything clearly. It's all through the lens of me. So, yeah, it's pretty wacky. And they don't do it intentionally. So then when you're talking to a victim and you're trying to have a rational discussion about how things really are, you feel like you're in a loony bin. You feel like Alice in Wonderland, like you've dropped down the rabbit hole. Because you're trying to have a sensible discussion. 2 plus 2 equals, and you know what the answer always comes back? Me. 2 plus 2 equals me. 4 plus 4 equals me. 6 plus 6, me. And you're shaking your head and you're trying to explain something to them, and everything is about them. You can't have rational discussions with a victim. You can't do it. And so you're trying to explain to them how their point of view is wrong. Well, now guess what happens? Now you become the person who is hurting the victim because you're not seeing it from their point of view. Now you're not sympathizing with them. Now you're not giving them the attention that they so richly deserve. Now you are the monster who's hurting them. So now you become the object of their rage. So now it gets even worse. So yeah, you could say that they have a distorted view of reality. And then you feel even more hopeless about communicating with them. A few weeks ago, another question, on a whim, I cleaned out one of the 4 refrigerators on my floor at work. Oh, I hardly dare even read any further. I can smell a victim at work here already. There was a victim lurking in one of these fridges. It looked like a science project gone bad, chock full of spilled and rotting food. See, this would be irrelevant. I haven't read any further, but I'm telling you, this is irrelevant to a victim. Because to a victim, it's all about who? Me. In the course of cleaning, I threw out almost everything, which would mean what? She threw out something that pertained to a victim. If I'm wrong here, I'll take all this back, but I doubt it. A week or so later, I was verbally attacked by a coworker, here comes the victim part, who was up in arms, here's the victim part, because of a container she had left in the fridge. Toward the end, now, there's only one reason that the coworker would attack her. Why? Because she felt victimized. Toward the end of her harangue, I love that word. It should remind me, you'd think that there should be a harangue pie. I realized that I had saved that particular container. But by then, I was far too self-righteous to tell her that. Actually, if I would have had that container, I would have beamed her with it. You'd think that I had never heard of real love. I have no desire to keep that darn thing now that I know who it belongs to. I'd return it, but I'm afraid she'll attack me again. I do realize that she is way empty, and I took not only her last $2, but kicked her in the shins on the way out the door. I know this is not about containers. Oh, this is beautiful. So, So what she did was, or actually what you did was, so you cleaned out the refrigerator and you dared to move the container of this victim. And remember, victims are the center of the world. So you removed the queen's container, the victim. You dared to do something to her. So here she comes at you with this. How dare you have done something to me, the center of the universe, which is the battle cry of the victim. Then, ironically, you responded to her with an equal measure of victimhood, which was, well, I was only trying to help. How dare you have misjudged me when I was only trying to do the right thing? And so inwardly, you responded to her victimhood by trying to be just as big a victim. And I don't know who won. Which is why now you don't feel like giving her back the container. It's like, well, if you're going to treat me like that, I'm not going to give you your container back. So there. So, you know, as you think about it a little bit more, and as you feel a little bit more loved, and as you see the picture better, you'll get over it. You will. You'll feel more loving, and what you'll do is you'll take the container back to her, and you'll say, you know, when you approached me the other day, I realized that I was wrong. I should have just immediately told you that I should have set the containers aside, like right next to the refrigerator, and said, perhaps labeled them, and said, these are the containers that I cleaned out of the refrigerator, and if any of these are yours, here they are. But I didn't do that. I was just thinking of myself, and I apologize. Because you don't need to address the fact that she was being a butthead, because she certainly didn't need to attack you. You were too afraid at the time. You don't need to go into all that. You don't need to explain victimhood to her. That would be like way over her head. You can explain your victimhood here, where we all love you. Because we've all acted like victims at various times. Certainly I have. Mesa Group says, how can I feel more loving toward my son-in-law, who I believe has wronged me and my daughter in so many ways? Failure to make payments on a vehicle, which I am paying for, failure to make child support payments to maintain my grandchildren, and the mean and abusive way he treats my daughter. How can I love him when I feel wronged? So, which is the most unloving? The unloving way that he has behaved, or the unloving, unforgiving way that you're now feeling toward him? What's the difference? Unloving is unloving. It's like, who's the most pregnant? You're pregnant or you ain't. You're either loving or you're not. All the things that you're describing about your son-in-law are unloving. You are right. That's right. He's unloving, he's drowning, he's empty and afraid, and he's reacting to the people around him by being irresponsible. He's reacting with getting and protecting behaviors. He's reacting with immature, selfish behaviors. And so are you. Because if you were loving, you would see him in a compassionate, understanding way, instead of reacting to him with irritation, anger, misunderstanding, impatience. Doesn't make you wronger. Notice I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, just saying unloving is unloving. And the way that you're seeing him is quite understandable. But what he needs is understanding. It doesn't make what he's doing right. But you can imagine that because of the way he behaves, people avoid him, They criticize him. They judge him. When he comes in the room, they give him that look like, so you're the irresponsible son-in-law, aren't you? You know, that look. When I got divorced, for example, it's been, 11 years ago, 100 years ago. For years and years afterward, everywhere I went, I knew when I would meet people who had ever passed through the wake of my ex-wife. Because if they had met her or even heard of her, when they met me, they would go, they'd already made their judgment. People treat you badly when they've made a judgment about you. And that's what they do with this kid. He needs to be treated with some understanding and some compassion, and he needs to be treated that way by you. So if you would do that with him, it would make a difference in his life, and most notably and most consistently, it would make a difference in your life. The bottom line to your question is, you need to see him as drowning. Huge difference. Oh, Karen says, I'm on a neighbor's dial-up. I'm laughing at your response to my email. Of course, I don't know which email that was, but I'm glad you're having a good time with that. I'm going to change the language of this email only because the way the question is phrased, it might identify the person who's being talked about. So sometimes I do that. Like, for example, if a lady writes and she says, my husband, for example, is a third grade teacher in Costa Mesa, California. I leave that out. And he's a real loser. And his name is John. Then I'll change the details. Let's see. My husband left me and our daughters when he chose to have an affair with a young lady who was known to all of us. And the young lady has since left him and gone off to college to begin a new life. He is adamantly not interested in staying married, but he is now concerned about how his daughters no longer wish to interact with him because of his behavior with the affair. He's insisting that we all undergo counseling together with a mutually agreed upon counselor to, quote, strive for the best possible outcome for all four of us. I think each one of us has a lot to gain in a positive, well-adjusted future if we both can see clearly through the pain and emotion we are facing and find a path through this that is respectful and honors the other, end quote. I'm going to translate this in a minute. He ends his plea by asking, will you join me in striving to make this process we are going through as decent and fair for all of us as is possible? Then she says, just what is fair considering the choices that he's made? I have been actively participating in real love coaching, which has been extremely effective for me and my daughters. For the sake of my daughters, what more can I do? Now, notice what he's saying. This is the guy who has gone off and had an affair with apparently a kid much younger than himself, like as in, the age of his daughters. And now what he's saying is we want counseling that will give the best possible outcome for all four of us. What he means is I'm looking for counseling that will make me look the best and make my daughters like me again. This is code speak for this, which is understandable. He's made, and this is the way victims see this. When victims make a big mistake, they want other people to bear responsibility for the decisions that they've made. Whereas people who are not victims say, I have made a huge mistake, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to bear full responsibility for my mistake. Whereas victims do this. well, we need to work together to see to it that it all works out best for everybody. No, he's not taking full responsibility for his mistakes at all. He wants everybody to just sort of get over what he has done. And that's understandable. And he wants to see to it that his wife, who was not unfaithful, somehow just makes it okay with the daughters. Now, ideally, everybody should get to the point where they are forgiving and are understanding of his mistake and become more loving. But that doesn't mean that it's the wife's responsibility to see to it that the daughters get over it. And it's not her job to shoulder all that or to cover up for what he's done. So, for example, it's very common when one partner has been unfaithful to say to the other one, now, I assume you're not going to be talking about me, and you better not be talking about me. Which, of course, makes the spouse who was not unfaithful feel guilty, like somehow, well, now I can't talk about the affair. Well, excuse me, the affair has happened. And so that doesn't obligate the faithful partner to never talk about it. I mean, what do you say? When the daughters now say to mom, so, well, how come you and dad aren't living together? What's mom going to do now? Lie? So, no, I would say to the mother, you don't want to be a victim. You don't want to say, oh, look what your father's done to me. No, that's victimhood, and that's stupid. But you simply tell the truth. We were in a relationship that wasn't doing very well. Certainly, I wasn't as loving as I could have been. If I had been more unconditionally loving, this probably wouldn't have happened. Just tell the truth about what you were doing. But then your father chose to go out and have a sexual relationship outside of our marriage. And now that's led to a series of decisions and a series of behaviors that have led to this, and now we're going through a divorce, and you just describe things as they are. You don't blame him. You simply describe the events as they've happened. And if you simply describe the truth as it's happened, you don't need to belabor it. You don't need to wallow in it, but you tell the truth about it, and you don't hide it. These girls that she's describing aren't 4-year-olds. These are teenagers. You don't need to protect your partner, but you don't beat your partner up either. See the difference? So you do what you can to be supportive and loving toward your daughters. You don't beat up your ex-partner. It's all about love. We were talking about that son-in-law from the Mesa group. Oh, that's a great question. This was the son-in-law who was abusive and nasty toward the person who's asking to the daughter. How can I be loving when I don't feel loving toward him? Because if I don't act like his behaviors affect my happiness, then won't he think his abusive behaviors are okay? Oh, that is such a good question. We believe that if we don't somehow communicate to people that they're doing the wrong thing, they won't know that they're doing the wrong thing. And I promise you that he already knows. It's kind of like our little kids at the dining room table. Our children are drinking something in a cup, our 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old spills milk all over the dining room table. And we think that if we don't say, oh, don't spill your milk, we think that if we don't say that, the 4-year-old won't figure out on his own that the milk belonged in the cup and not all over the table and on your lap. We actually think that our children are that stupid. They're not. But we treat them as though they're that stupid. And people aren't that stupid. No, your son-in-law really, really knows that his behavior is wrong. Really, he does. He knows that it's wrong to be abusive, ugly, mean-spirited, irresponsible. He knows this. So why does he do all those things? Because he's empty and afraid and alone and drowning. I'm not kidding. People really behave like this because they're drowning. Now, follow the rest of this. So if you've got a drowning person and they're behaving like this because they're empty and afraid, and then we come along and we're critical toward them and we kind of isolate them and we do this to them whenever we see them. Oh, it's you again. I want you to know I disapprove of the way you treat my daughter. Now, if I treat him that way every time I see him, is he now going to feel more, follow me here, this isn't real hard, what's behind door number 1, is he going to feel more loved, or is he going to feel more empty and afraid? He's going to feel more empty and afraid. So, if I make him feel more empty and afraid, is he now going to feel more likely to behave like a drowning person or a loved person? Drowning person. So now is he going to be more likely to behave better or worse toward my daughter? Worse. So here's the craziness of this. Pay attention. The more I criticize and berate my son-in-law, the more I make it likely that he will behave worse toward my daughter. I'm not joking. It's true. Whereas the more loving that I behave toward my son-in-law, and encouraging and accepting and kind that I behave toward him, who doesn't need more kindness? The more kindness I share with him, the more likely it is that his behavior toward her will change. It's not about knowledge, really. This idiot child really does know that what he's doing is wrong. No kidding. No, what he's missing isn't information. What he's missing is love. That's why he behaves like he does. I am not making this up. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've watched this work in the lives of too many people. He needs love. Now, Aurelia, you've asked so many good questions here already. It's like it's not fair. But you said, how can I be loving when I don't feel loving toward him? I get this. Watching him treat your daughter badly kind of just lights your fire, doesn't it? That's why we're having this discussion. It's critical that you hear from sane people who've been doing this for a long time. Me, from people in the Mesa group, from other people, from the books, the real love books that you read, that you hear from lots of people, that your son-in-law is not a bad person, that he's behaving like this because he's drowning. Really, he's not pretending to be drowning. And the more you see him as a drowning person, the less angry you will feel toward him. Then, the more you talk about yourself instead of him, the more, for example, that right there in the loving group you're in, instead of talking about him, the more you talk about how you are not being loving toward him, and the more you feel unconditionally loved by the people around you, gradually, not overnight, gradually, you will begin to feel more loving toward that, what looks like to be a creep of a son-in-law. I get it. I really do. I really get that you just want to smack him up the side of the head. I understand. I didn't start out understanding this. I'd want to just punch him too. But he doesn't need a punch. And the more we feel like punching him, the more he feels that. And then the more in turn he feels like punching your daughter. That's kind of how it works out. The more anger I feel in my life, the more I add to the level of anger in the world. The more I detract from the love in the world. And it spreads. It's a real sickness. And I make the world a sicker place. The world really feels it. I'm really not exaggerating. Alex says, my son is coming home for Christmas and staying with me. So you want us to call him and tell him it's a big mistake? He's less than conscientious about bathing and brushing his teeth. He's 24 years old. Alex, it's too late, sweetie. In the past, this is getting too funny. I can't keep reading. In the past, I have handed him a clean towel when he comes in the house. This is better than stand-up, Alex. I've handed him a clean towel when he comes in the house, and then I take and wash all his clothes, as opposed, I suppose, to burning them. I've been trying to have a conversation with him to set up an agreement before he comes, but he doesn't answer emails or cell phone. Any suggestions? Yes, Alex, I do have a suggestion. I do. Alex, you're just funnier than words can tell. The answer is found in the thing that you said at the top. He's 24. That's the answer. Really. Leave him alone. He's 24 years old. Rejoice. I mean this. Have a party. Put on Christmas carols or whatever your favorite Christmas music is, and have a blowout party that this man is willing to come home and spend any part of his Christmas holidays with his mother, with you. Be thrilled that he's willing to come home and spend time with a woman who hands him a towel when he gets in the door and washes his clothes and sends him emails to make arrangements about this. So just be glad that he's willing to be with you, sweetie. Don't wash his clothes unless he asks you to. Do not hand him a toothbrush. Make no comments about his bathing or brushing his teeth. Don't make any comments about modifying his behavior, his hygiene, or anything about him. Talk about nothing but what he wants to talk about and how glad you are to see him, and see how the holidays go. And you're going to have such a good time having him home. After my children left the house, I decided that I was just thrilled that they would come home, and that anything that they did with their lives after they left home, after high school, was none of my stinking business. And since I brought up the word stinking, if he actually stinks, go down to the store and get a can of Lysol or whatever your favorite room deodorizer is, and use that. But be thrilled that he's coming home to see you, and leave him alone. You're a sweetie. Alex says, but he stinks. Yeah, and be grateful for his sweet spirit. So what? One of my sons can be less than sweet smelling also. And I'm so glad to see him that I don't care. In fact, to this day, none of my other children will sleep in the same room as him. None of them. And I still don't care. I'm just thrilled to see him. So I do understand. And I'll never tell him. I'd rather love him than have a sweet-smelling room. Not even close. Pleasanton Group. My husband has a tradition of taking our 11-year-old son out to buy fairly inexpensive presents for everyone in our extended family. He did this with his dad and thought it would be a nice way to help our son learn to be giving. Our son is very generous and enjoys shopping, and he chooses amazing gifts for each person. I asked the earlier question about the brother who demands gift cards, yet I just arrived and didn't hear the response. The response is archived, and so you'll be able to hear the response to the earlier question it's like 4 days, I think. Mike gets the archived question up to the gift cards. And I don't hear a question in this one, so you'll have to let me know. All right, let's see. Next, a question that was sent to me. I handle all the finances in our family, and my husband, while usually frugal, will make irresponsible purchases, which place our family deeper and deeper in debt. Over my objections and attempts to reason with him, he went out and purchased a ski boat in the middle of winter, and given that we live hundreds of miles from any lakes here in the middle of Arizona, that probably would look a little strange. So the boat will sit for several months unused, and for which we have to make payments on the loan, insurance, title, and licensing fees. As a result of this purchase, we now cannot afford to pay an important monthly bill to which we both committed on behalf of our son, nor do we have any extra money for Christmas expenses. We are maxed out on our credit. I've even thought about asking our church for welfare assistance, but I can't bring myself to do such a thing, knowing that both me and my husband, contrary to our beliefs, have been financially irresponsible. I tried to shield my husband from the true nature of our finances, but I've done so to avoid his anger or to keep him from making me out to our children as the sad, angry mom, compared to him being the Disneyland dad. A real love coach helped me understand the cost of my husband's making this unilateral decision and the effects this will have on our family. It's been suggested that I simply present our financial situation to the family as a problem to be solved, with a liability versus asset statement unemotionally stating in black and white the bind that we're in. I don't want my children to fall into this same trap with their families, and I wish for them to learn how to be truthful as well as responsible with money instead of living a lie, which is what my husband and I have both been doing for years. How do I deal with this difficult situation in a loving way? You're right, you have been living a lie. And you first have to get out of the victim little thing that you're doing here. You've been handling the finances, and you've accurately identified that you have been shielding, you've been doing the finances and shielding your husband from the true nature of the finances because you want to avoid his anger. Because when he deals with the money, and you've got to give me feedback here if I'm identifying any of the details inaccurately here, because details I can't get except from what I got here. But you deal with the finances because I'm guessing that whenever he has to deal with money, he gets all irritated and he takes it out on you. And so you do it to keep peace in the family. You'll do almost anything to avoid that conflict. Well, now look what you're paying for it. So you've been handling the finances and been playing the martyr, but you've been doing it for yourself. You've been doing it so that you could have peace and quiet. And now this is really backfiring on you. And he's been taking advantage of you. And why wouldn't he? Because you've been giving him permission to do it. Here, you've been shielding him. you haven't been really holding him accountable. You haven't been sitting down and saying, so here's what the finances are, and so here's what happens when we spend money. And you haven't been sitting down and saying weekly or monthly, here's what's happening with the money, here's where we are, here's where the credit cards are, here's what our spending, here's what our income, here's what our outgo is, here's what our relative assets, and here's what our financial situation is. You haven't been doing that. And so, essentially, you've been giving him tacit permission to do whatever he wants. Can you see how he would get that feeling? So then he goes out and irresponsibly spends money. Well, why wouldn't he feel like he could? You haven't really given him any reason why he should feel like he shouldn't. So we really need to sit down, you do, and see, your solution is to go from that, pretty much no responsibility at all, to, you said, it's been suggested that I present this financial situation to the whole family. Whoa! I mean, that's like going from complete modesty to, let's do a strip routine in front of the Super Bowl. Maybe we could do something in between. You don't want to go from no accountability to talking about this in front of the whole family. This would embarrass him to death. So, because there's certain subjects that guys just get really embarrassed about and then angry. You need to understand why he gets angry. Guys tend to get most embarrassed and then angry about money and sex because it most reflects the core of their masculinity. And so he's angry because he's afraid. Well, Josh, I don't want to talk about this because he's angry. No, he's afraid. That's what he is. Scared. And so you need to have the discussion about the finances, not with the whole family. You need to have the discussion with him. So you need to set aside a time when there's not a crisis, not when you're in a big tizzy, and say, we need to, you and I need to set aside a time when we can talk for uninterrupted, when there are no kids around, no other appointment. The Super Bowl isn't about to begin in an hour and a half. No possibility whatever of being interrupted for a minimum of an hour, at least, whatever it's going to take you. And you sit down and you show him exactly what your finances are. You say, this is what's coming in, this is what's going out now, and this is what the foreseeable future is likely to be. So if it keeps going on like this, this is what our condition, our financial condition is likely to be in a month, in 2 months, in 3 months, so on. And you say, so we were not able to do blank with Christmas. We have this commitment with our son. Blah, 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 blah. We simply will not be able to write the check out for our son's monthly, whatever it is, commitment. We can't do it for the month of December. We won't be able to do it for January. We won't. All right, so that's the condition. And rather than shield him, protect him, fix him, you say, so this is something that in the past I've just been handling, and I have been wrong. That has been a mistake on my part, and I apologize for that. It's been wrong for me to just shield you from it, to try to handle it all on my own, all on my own, poorly, I might add. Now we have to decide, what are some possible solutions? And you then need to have a large sheet of butcher paper, whatever. You can get real cheap sheets of large paper, and write down what some of your possible solutions are. He gets an additional part-time job. You just write up different solutions. You get another job. You move from the house you're in to a smaller house, and you write all the solutions up. You don't just say no to everything, and then later on you can write down, well, no, that's maybe not a great one, but that's a possible one. You cross out the ones that are obviously stupid later on. You write down all the possible solutions. One of the possible solutions is we sell the boat. Well, but we just bought the boat last month. I know, but that's one of the possible solutions. You write down every possible solution. We sell the second child into a life of child porn. That's one of the possible solutions. I know we may not do that one, but that's one of the possible solutions. You write down every imaginable solution so that they're all out there. Now, the reason for that, putting them all out there, is that then he doesn't just become angry and say no to each one. See how smart this is? Instead of having a big fight over each one. No, now they're all there. And you put out some of the solutions that are a big sacrifice to you. You put down, I sell my wedding ring. I'm just making stuff up. You put down, we sell my, you know what you have. You sell my IBM stocks. We sell you put every imaginable solution up there. We go and get church welfare. We go down and get food stamps. You put them all there. You don't say no to anything. It's all there. Then you rank them all by feasibility. A, very likely. We could do that. Then B, maybe, if we really had to. And instead of doing a C, you just cross it off. We probably won't sell, Billy into a life of, prostitution, so we'll cross that off. But put everything up there initially, so that both of you see that you're really thinking, and then you go from there. See, because now what you've done by putting everything up there is you're both participating now as a couple, which to this point you haven't done. You've been doing it all alone. It gets you started thinking as a team. And it puts the boat up there, and it puts everything up there as a possibility. And he's got to participate. He's got to see that going and asking for welfare is one of the possibilities. And if you're going to ask for welfare, you know what? He may be the one that has to go do it. Why should you be doing everything? And if you've been doing all this by yourself, then you're the loon. You're the one that's been doing all this to yourself. And you have to see that. If it's not been a joint effort, that's your fault. So this is a real opportunity, this discussion, for you to change not just the way you do finances. It's an opportunity for you to begin to change the way you do your marriage. Because the way you're doing finances, let me clue you in, is a real indication of the way you do your marriage, that you're not doing things together. Does that help? Now so let me know if that helps, and then we're going to get back to because it was kind of a two-part, whoops, we're over time. I'm going to save the 11-year-old who buys Christmas presents question. I didn't forget about it. We just ran out of time, and I apologize. And I'll save that for next time. So, love you all tons. I'm going to see you not Tuesday, but next Thursday, December 27th at 9 p.m. And love y'all. See you then.